Hooters, here's how you assemble your own. Here's what your kit comes with. A face, includes ear tufts, button eyes, eye patch, beaks, and there's the wing, tooth fairy pocket, the foot, and the face. He's looking a little drunk now. The back is either your choice of fur, or either cotton velvet, otherwise known as velveteen, or cotton corduroy, all natural. The eyes are wood, everything's natural. And here are your basic instructions. If they weren't sufficient, you're watching this video. And you'll have a bag of stuffing, which is wheat and flax. And either lavender will be in with that, or orange peel and cloves. Or it'll be plain and you can put an essential oil of your choice. I recommend the higher end oils, like Young Living. It's pure. And here's what you're going to need. You're going to need threads to match your eye patch, your wing, your foot, and your beak. You'll need a pair of good scissors and a really high-end fancy funnel. These are really hard to come by, very expensive, but you won't be sorry you have it. This is for stuffing later. And of course, a sewing machine. I prefer a 1941 Singer Featherweight because it goes through everything. Or a glover's needle if you want to do this by hand, in which case your kit will have come with a glover's needle. Before we start, whether you have a cotton back or a fur back, a note to my fellow environmentalists, the fur that we use is from a furrier. They are the least wasteful clothing manufacturers, and they have all their scrap turned into plating. That's what this beautiful work is here. This is all the little pieces of scrap that got sewn together and turned into a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet, which they then use for collars and cuffs, and I get the scrap from that. And that's what we're using for the backs of the Hooters. The leather is from a leather clothing manufacturer, and you can see there's designs on some sides of it, so you can choose which side you feel works best with your piece if you have a double-sided piece of leather. And again, this is all scrap from clothing. So yeah, choose which side you like. This stuff that we'll be using today in this video has only got one significant side. So the first thing you'll be sewing on is your beak. So you have your cream or white colored thread. Position your beak so that it is not going to shove the eye patch up into the seam allowance at the top. You don't want it too high. Anyway, about 2.5 inches from the top is good. And you start at the top center of the beak and you sew down to the side, across to the center bottom. Most sewing machines should go through this leather. It's garment weight. But the 1941 Singers are a real dream. You don't have to worry about back tacking. In fact, the less stitches you put in leather, the better. Otherwise, you perforate it and it turns into a postage stamp. Cut your threads, and then you change thread to match your eye patches so that they cover the top of the beak. You just want to sew about a 1/16 of an inch to an 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, all the way around. Straightening it as you go. Leather walking foots are a luxury that don't come with every machine. I make do without. Right here, and we just backtack at the end, not the beginning. Then we'll seal it up, trim your threads, and now we sew on the foot patch with the same color. Pause because foot patch is vanished. Sewing on the foot patch, a little bit tricky around the toes. You can do it by hand here. You want your stitches for leather to always be the biggest stitches your sewing machine has, and a little bit smaller when you're going up and around the toes here. But generally you want your biggest stitch because the fewer holes you have in leather, the stronger it is, unlike cotton. Okay, and again, no back tacking. I'm just going to overlay, because this isn't a seam allowance, so we don't need to worry about back tacking. Trim your threads, change your thread to match your wing. Okay, so now we're going to do the wing. We'll be starting approaching the top on the outside. You're going to be sewing about 1/8 of an inch from the edge so that it's tacked to the face, but it's all outside the final seam allowance when you sew the face to the back. We'll go up about 1.5 inches and then do 3 stitches, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. You want about 1/4 of an inch there, and turn it down. And now you want to outline your pocket, and this is going to be a ballpark. You've got about 2 inches down, 2 inches across, and 2 inches up roughly. And down like that. Nice little rounded corner. Remembering to keep your fingers on the leather so you don't have it shift. Got a cat saying hello at my feet here. And then up, and you want to try and wind up coming straight up to the tip of the wing, right there. And now we'll be doing 1/16 of an inch away from the edge, down the entire length of the wing. Careful not to sew over our threads. And then across the bottom and up a bit. This is all within seam allowance, so don't worry if your threads if you've gotten slightly misaligned here, because this is all going to be in the final seam allowance when you sew the front to the back. Just trim your leather as close as you can without cutting your threads so that you won't be misled later. And that's as far as you need to sew the wing patch. You don't need to sew from here to here. So now we'll put the tufts on. This particular tuft is made of fox fur, obviously using a infinitesimally small piece of leather. This is from the furrier again, a little tiny piece of scrap. Nothing's ever thrown out. Because there's always someone like you or me that's going to use even a teeny tiny piece of leather like this for the effect. So you just tack this on, go up and down once. This is all outside the seam allowance or within the seam allowance of your final piece. You just need to hold it there for now. With the other one, I like to make sure that the tuft is facing up a little bit. You can see this one's up. Put this one on too. Leather side up so you can see where you're sewing. Just down and up. And then trim your thread. Now you're ready to sew on the eyes. Now these are wood. All the eyes I use are either wood or coconut shell or seashell. 100% natural. Everything I make is biodegradable so that Mother Earth can take it back into her bosom. I have to go find a needle, so we're going to have to pause. I'll see you in a minute. Personality of your owl. Is he amiable, well-meaning? Not very intelligent? Kind of crazy? There's anything you want. I kind of like them close together. W. Bush eyes, you know? Okay, so we're going to start with this one right here. Just keep an idea of where you want it. Flip it over. I've got a simple knot at the end of my thread. I'm going to anchor my thread by going through before the knot so that it's very secure. More secure than the buttons on your shirt so that nobody's little kid eats the buttons. Okay. The way I like to sew the 4-hole buttons on is to start with one through one of the holes, and I fold the leather and the fabric so that I can see 2 of the holes. I'm in the bottom right, I come up through the top left, and then always have miles and miles of thread, because that's what your mother always warned you against. You'll get lots of knots this way. And I put it through the bottom left, straight down. A little tricky to get through the first time because it's the leather. Hold your thumb on it and you will avoid those knots your mother warned you about. And then through the top right, and then down through the bottom right. So you're always going up and down on the side that's facing you. And this results in a very cute crisscross on the side away from you. That's the crisscross. So you do this a number of times, and then I'll show you the knot when I'm done. Of crosses, about 7. Gone through each hole about 7 times. Wrap it 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to put it back down through the fabric. Oh, to the back, there it is. Poke it through. And then I just take some of the thread, I'm going to flatten this out a little bit. Sometimes it folds up a bit. I'm just taking it out. Put it through some of the threads that are already there. And then we're going to do a single crochet to give us ourselves our finishing knot. Take the extra thread out there. So keep your hand in there. Grab a bit of the thread. Pull it through once. Pull it through twice. And then pull the whole thing through, needle and all. And that's your knot. And now start the same thing over here. You want to do another one over here, a single crochet. Leave yourself a nice bit of slack there. You don't want the eyes to be pulling. Do 2 little stitches there, which gives you a loop on the other side. And then you pull once, twice, and then pull the needle through 3 times. And now your eyes, if they do come off, will come off independently of one another and won't cause a whole breakdown. Okay, this is where I want the eye to be. I'm going to come up through one of the holes. See if I can do this without poking my finger. Or the wood. There we go. A little bit of a cheat. Okay, so I'm going to use a similar method for the 4 holes as I do, or I'm going to use a similar method for the 2 holes as I did for the 4, in that I'm going to keep one eye or one hole visible, poke through the leather and the holes. Ooh, that's tough. First time through. There we go. Use the table as my thimble. You don't want to make it too tight or you'll have a hard time flattening it out. We'll just go through this about 7 times and see you at the knot. Gone through a number of times now, you can see, probably about 7. 1, 2, 3, wrap it. I always give buttons a shank, it just makes them look less embedded. I'm going to put it through to the back. Some people use thimbles, I just use the table, my thumbnails. Flatten it out, find a thread that you've established or your original knot so that you can make your single crochet knot. 1, 2, 3, pull the needle through, 4. Nice knot there. Snip your thread, and now you have your completed Hooter face. So when you sewed the wing on, you didn't sew the pocket shut. This is for the tooth fairy pocket, or when your lavender or orange peel and clove or whatever other scent you may have chosen for your Hooter starts to fade, you can put an essential oil on the fabric, a couple of drops right there, massage it through the owl, and it won't leave a mark. Okay, so we're going to sew a fur back to this piece because the cotton back is a lot easier. Yours will come pre-trimmed. I'm just going to take a little bit of the extra fur off here so that I don't have any confusion with where my actual seam edge is. fur machines do this incredible work with no seam allowance, as you can see, but I will be doing standard seamstress work, which involves 1/4 to 3/8 seam allowance all the way around. In order to do that, I need to be able to see where the leather is, because that's what I'm sewing to, not the fur. I'm just going to trim around the edge of this a bit. There we go. You can see that the leather isn't right where the fur is. And all of this will be invisible when we're done. All right, looks like a really bad haircut. Okay. So, most domestic machines can handle this. What you want to do is make sure that the right side, the one that you want on the outside of your final piece, is facing each other. So both sides are, this is the face you want to see, this is the face you want to see. Close it up. This side, you can see by the stitches, has the wing on it. We're going to start over here so that the opening we leave for turning it right side out is not on the leather wing. All right. So we're going to start in the place that's going to leave us a nice flat area for the opening. We're going to start right under the ear, right beside the eye. Make sure your machine is threaded, that's always handy. And take a cookie. And there we go. Make sure you're all lined up. Biggest stitches possible, 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to go right up to the corner to where the ear patch is. And we're going to leave the stitching that you basted that ear tuft down with on the outside of your seam, right there. And because your ear tuft is facing up, you want to make sure you tuck it in before you come down and around and across the top of the head. Let me do a couple of stitches here. Okay, so when starting out on the next part of your sewing across the top, twist up your tuft so that it doesn't get in the way of your seam. Hold it with your thumb. Line up the corner of the leather and your fabric. And you almost straighten it out with your tension. And just sew along. 1/4 inch seam allowance. You will have tacked down your tuft an eighth, about an eighth, a little more than an eighth here, of an inch away from your edge. So you're going to sew now 1/4 of an inch in from that edge so that the tacking will be in the seam allowance. Go straight down. Keep your leather lined up with your fabric. And tuck in the fur if you haven't trimmed it enough. Again, check your corners. There's a slight corner at the bottom of each owl. You can see. Line those up. It's the only reason it's there is to make sure that you don't wind up with too much of a misalign by the time you get it all the way around, because the fur does make things move a little bit. Now as you approach the pocket, you'll see there's the pocket stitching, and there's the edge that you sewed to the leather down. Don't need to go all the way around, but you want to be sewing now between these two seams. We're closer to the edge this time. We will be going around this twice to make sure that the seam doesn't ever pop. You don't want grains everywhere in your bed. Just check every once in a while that your fabric's going to line up nicely at the very end as you get around this bend, as you can forgive yourself a little more now than you can right at the end. There we go. And leave yourself about 2 inches because we're going to need to flip this right side out and stuff it. I'm going to back tack just a little bit. Actually, the purpose of the back tacking is to give yourself some room between the two lines of stitching. So you can see there's a bit of width here. from the first stitch to now my second line all the way around, and having that width there will make it a lot easier to finish and close at the end. So just remember that, and I'll show you later. So all the way around the second time is going to be a lot faster. Okay, so again, I'm going to finish with a little bit of room between the two lines of stitching, between here and here, and when you flip it right side out, it'll be a lot easier to close. So you can clip a couple of places to avoid puckering across the top, anywhere there's an indentation, under the ears. Be careful not to clip your threads. Now you can trim off any excess. Sometimes there's more than others. This is just a very minor amount at the tips here. Not really significant, but and now you turn it right side out. I like to stick my finger into the corner, push it through. Oh yeah, pardon me, before we flip it, a quick look on the back and make sure you didn't move too much and wind up stitching off the leather. It looks like we're pretty good here. Okay, stick your fingers in, push your thumb out. Here's one tuft. Stick your fingers into the next corner, push it out. And you got a nice sharp corner. Get the eyes through the hole. Hello. And then poke the rest through. There you go. It's looking pretty good. Use your very expensive funnel, stick it in there. You can see that there's quite a bit of room. And now you're going to stuff it. I've chosen orange peel and clove for this. I put them in the bag of grains last night. Put those in first if they're separate. Yours will probably be mixed. If you've chosen a different flavor, you can put it in first to make sure that if you overstuff, you can dump grains out without dumping out your flavor. The bag of grains that comes with your kit should be measured so that it's fairly accurate. If anything, there'll be a little extra. Just to make sure. To make sure he's nicely stuffed, you can hold the hole, wiggle it around a little. I think this is a little overstuffed, so I'm going to pour a few grains out. Should be good. There, that should be a nice amount. You can almost get your finger all the way through it right in the middle. So now we just have to sew them shut. So now is where your two seams come in handy. It just holds the fabric and the fur in really nicely. This one, make sure the grains aren't in their seam there, because they will, if it's a wheat grain, it'll pop your needle. Feel the leather, make sure that there is leather curled into the actual seam, and you aren't going to sew it with the leather edge showing. Make sure it's lined up nicely. This is the tricky bit. Make sure no grain gets under your seam. Start about 1/4 inch above the last stitches so they're well and truly closed. Feel the leather with your nail. It's right there. And now we back tack and then forward. Nice and careful. Making sure your leather's lined up. Feel it. You can do all of this by hand. If the leather eyepiece patches and the wing and the foot give you too much trouble when you're sewing them with your machine, you can sew them on by hand. There we go, back tack a little bit. Snip your threads. It does not matter what your bottom thread color is, as you will not see it in the fur. Make sure you've got everything in there, pull it apart. Yep, you didn't just sew it to the fur. You don't want to just sew it to the fur. If you do, you have to go over it a little bit more, but there you go. There's your Hot Hooter. Make yourself a pair. Microwave it for about 1 to 2 minutes, but you have to move it every minute or every 30 seconds to make sure there are no hot spots. Even the rotating ones get hot spots, and you don't want to singe him, or he'll start smelling like burnt popcorn. There you go. Ivy's Hot Hooters.